I played for nearly 18 months with another player who I don't think ever learned how to add modifiers. This was 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. They almost never spoke outside combat, in or out of character. They rarely, if ever, remember their spell DC or how to roll to attack, and I mean like over this entire time. They often only barely remember their spells. Just the general concept would need to reread them or the GM would have to do it for them. Every round of combat felt like it was session 1. First combat, yet again. All in all, it was a minor thing. I would read their character sheet to know their stuff and speed things along. I was another player. They weren't disruptive, but man oh man, I still can't understand how this is possible. And the weirdest thing is, they aren't like dumb. Well, not outside of the stuff. In fact, they are very intelligent, and we spoke about other non-RPG topics and they had great insight and knowledge. I still find the whole thing just so bizarre. Would play with them again, though. I definitely respect the OP's clemency here, because this sort of thing, while it doesn't anger me, it does mildly annoy me. As a DM, I like to see players engaged in the game, and it doesn't feel like they're engaging when they don't even know how to play the damn game in the first place. Guys, it's okay if you don't know how to play, but eventually, you've got to learn. I've been running games for several years now, and this was the first time I had to kick a player. I felt bad about it ever since we were friends to some extent outside the game, but after doing so, I found out that his problems were only just getting started. I came to the conclusion that I needed to remove him from my table, but it wasn't until I typed out the issues to a confidant that I realized just how bad it was. This is a Pathfinder 2nd edition group. Main character syndrome, even after constant reminders that there are 3 other equal players present, telling players what they should be doing in an unsolicited manner, even after the players told him to let them play their character, always being the first person to answer, "Alright guys, what's next?" questions put to the group. Every single time. If the group wanted to do something he didn't, he usually tried to yank the wheel by saying, "As soon as healing is done, I start heading towards this door without saying anything first." Every time I asked a clarifying question about a character's DC, spells, and so on, he would answer immediately, and was wrong more than half the time. Always choosing uncommon items, assuming they were more powerful or at least unique enough to wow people. At first he ignored that they needed GM approval until of course I, the GM, asked how he got a certain spell or ability. We used Hero Lab Online, which marks GM approval options in blue, and we started referring to this only as shopping in the blue section. Being the only person at the table to min-max while others chose roleplay options primarily, and then bragging the entire time about how much damage he did and how high his skill checks were. There's no reason why his far northern dwarf on the quest for the frozen flame was saved by clockwork, except for the fact that I gave him +2 on initiative rolls. He used his large construct companion to physically trap a mini-boss in a corner. Decent, in theory, but this really upset the rest of the party because its large size meant other melee player characters could not reach this boss, including the player character who had beef with the mini-boss. However, he thought this was a win and laughed while the other player characters moved around to another area of the cavern and pulled a second encounter, almost leading to the death of the player character with a story connection. During the heroic campaign, he insisted on trying to become a lich as soon as the option is available at level 12. We started talking about this around level 5. I warned him that liches are undeniably evil, and he disagreed. He wanted to be allowed to go lich and thus never truly die, but still continue to travel with heroes and have the world's NPCs just be cool with it, I guess. Guys, we're here to help the downtrodden. Never mind that dude's flaming eye sockets and frightful aura. I cited the Book of the Dead's language that the process requires a unique and incredibly evil ritual. He still insisted he could make it work, despite my warning that it would likely end with his backup character helping the party destroy the lich that used to be their adventuring buddy. Would have a cool story beat, but with the right person. And he was not the right person. He wanted a background choice money counter from Bloodlord's player guide to give him some extra money. When asked how much money out of curiosity, he wanted to start at level 1 with 20 gold pieces instead of 15 gold pieces, a 33% increase for a background choice. I can almost guarantee he chose the background for the potential benefit and made his backstory fit the background instead of the other way around. He constantly talked about the next 19 levels of abilities he would get and how powerful they were, see bullet above about the lich archetype, while others were enjoying what they had now and focused on playing a role during the game. Everyone wants to level, but his stance was always, "I can't wait for level 12 when I get ... while he's halfway through level 2. It was disruptive. Last and certainly not least, this one's a doozy. He wanted to give me a gift of 3D terrain for our adventure, Quest for the Frozen Flame. He didn't know what was coming in the adventure, but he wanted to keep it a surprise to me. So he called up his local game store and had them look in the AP book on the shelves and had them determine which terrain sets would do the trick. Of course, none directly applied, but he bought them and handed them to me for use in the Calamity Caves. He thought I would be grateful, but to me he spoiled the surprise, tried to divert my plan to use his terrain set, which didn't really work for the area I wanted, and he wanted me to thank him for it. I asked him to never try something like that again and said that getting involved in the future of our story was a big deal to me. Stop trying to get involved in what's ahead, just play the game. After all that, we are moving to the Bloodlords AP now, and I reassessed if I want to sign this dude up for another year plus of sitting at my table. I decided I didn't have it in me any longer. Breaking it off went well, but despite the list above, I still managed to feel bad for the amount of money he put into things like terrain, Hero Lab licenses, miniatures he bought and paid for himself, etc. It was an expensive hobby for the guy, and one he really liked, and I felt like I was taking that away from him. I found out from a mutual friend after removing him from the table that he bought the first 2 books of the Bloodlords AP to know stuff in advance. His justification is that his character knew the politics of the region, so he should know before the party does. If I hadn't already kicked him, there's a half dozen reasons why this latest revelation would have been enough to do it as soon as I found out. It was actually on this very night that we had our first Bloodlord session, and it was a great time without him. TLDR, kicked a player for 100 small annoyances, found out that he bought the AP books to cheat at a cooperative game. I completely feel the DM on this entire situation. I also had a problem player who had 100 small inconveniences, and then after I kicked them out of the game, I found out about one big thing that would have resulted in their immediate removal if I knew earlier. So yeah, definitely sympathize with this. I think the worst part about this guy is trying to hold himself above the other players at the table, which is just never a good thing. We're all equals playing this game together. Even the DM is part of the group. And one player trying to hold himself above everyone else as the best for whatever reason is just never fun for anyone. No one likes it when somebody has a superiority complex at Dungeons & Dragons, a game you're supposed to be working together to play. Also, while buying your DM a gift like that is very sweet, you need to make sure that it's actually desired and actually something they want to use in the game. Trying to buy something in advance, way in advance, and basically trying to plan the DM's final encounter for them is just not okay. If somebody said, I can buy you terrain for your D&D game, I'd instantly say no, because I switch up what terrain I'm going to use, what map I'm going to use for combat every couple hours before the session, so it would be not very helpful. Even if this isn't the intention, gifts like that can feel manipulative, like you're trying to bargain with your DM for something, which, look, I get it, DM bribe jokes are funny, but only when they're just jokes. We had a visit from some of our family, and it was 10 p.m. on the night before they arrived. The youngest of them, age 10, said they couldn't wait to play Dungeons & Dragons with us. There were no plans to play Dungeons & Dragons that day. So our DM quickly made a one-shot that night, and the rest of us made some last-minute level 1 characters. We also made a rogue character for the 10-year-old to play since there was no time for him to learn how to make one. He wanted a character who was cool, just like me, so we made him a noble. My DM managed to get all the maps together and set up an excuse plot complete with world building, so we were ready to begin the session when our family members arrived at 1:15 p.m. Whoops, turns out the 2 older brothers of the 10-year-old were suddenly interested in joining too. We waited for 2 hours while they made their characters last minute. We had Smash Bros. Ultimate, so that wasn't too bad. So the session started, and the DM described the premise of the setting. Basically, we were attending a princess pageant, and the winner would be adopted by the head of the royal family. For the introduction of the 10-year-old's rogue, the DM stated that he was taken in off the streets by a noble, and his stepsister is one of the princesses in the pageant. The 10-year-old then openly declared, out of character, that he couldn't bear to have his stepsister taken away, that he would kill the entire royal family to stop the adoption. We didn't add that to his backstory or character traits, he just came up with that one on the spot, all on his own. After everyone finished their character introductions, the rogue told his father that he needed to go to the bathroom. This was a lie, but he passed the deception check. After getting away from his father, he tried to kill one of the princesses on stage by shooting a chandelier with a longbow. The DM politely informed him that as a noble, he was allowed to bring melee weapons, but not ranged weapons to the event, so he didn't have a longbow. The rogue then made his way to the kitchen, where he was stopped by the guards. He got the guards to leave by convincing them that his father was having a severe stomach ache. He passed the deception check again. He then went to the kitchen and was confronted by the chef, a cleric played by another player. The chef insisted that he leave, and the rogue insisted that he was there for some VIP food. The rogue won a deception versus insight check against the chef. The rogue was actually there with the intent of poisoning the food. After the chef handed over some food, the rogue decided that now is the perfect time to get rid of a potential witness. So he drew his rapier and announced to the chef, "It's time to visit your grandma." What the holy hell, this is a violent 10-year-old. Initiative was rolled and some guards arrived in the kitchen. The rogue went first. He used his rapier to slice up the aforementioned food and claimed that right there, that was actually his intention all along. This didn't work on the chef, not just because the roll failed and not just because the rogue had just threatened to kill him, but because slicing up the food with a rapier was just plain insulting to the chef. The guards didn't put together that the rogue was trying to commit a murder, and the DM decided that these guards recognized the rogue, a noble, and were familiar with his antics. The rogue then insisted he was 20 years old and could do whatever he wanted, and also the chef was rude, and the chef called him an idiot, and the rogue wanted to speak with the manager. The guards were not too pleased and returned him to his father, who is now confirmed not to be having a stomachache. With all that out of the way, the DM is finally able to give us the first plot hook. The host of the pageant pulled my character, a guard for the event, off to the side and told me that the princess of the head royal family was missing, and if the event continued without her, a war would break out. The host told me to gather the cleric in the kitchen, the druid backstage, and any individuals of noteworthy power, basically anyone with a class level, in the audience to help me find the missing princess. This was a tall order, since the identity of the princess was a secret, but we were apparently the host's best shot at resolving the matter quickly and discreetly. So off I went to gather all the player characters, taking care not to mention exactly who we were looking for, as that would potentially lead to a war apparently. The last person I needed to get was the rogue. As I tried to explain what I needed help with, the rogue's father interrupted with, "What did my son do now?" To which I asked, "Wait, what did he do?" The rogue begged his dad to let him join us and claimed, falsely of course, that he would be good this time. He failed his deception check against both his in-game father and me with a grim face. I walked away. Of course, the player is 10 years old, so I reassured him that the DM would find another way to work him into the main quest. But the rogue did not give up on his murder plan. His father wouldn't fall for the classic "I have to go to the bathroom" excuse a second time. So, to get away from his father once again, he decided to poop his own pants so his father would have no choice but to let him use the bathroom this time. He narrowly passed the constitution check, but his plan backfired as his father was now fed up and was about to take him home to avoid further embarrassment to the family name. The rogue then grabbed his poop and flung it at his father, who disowned him on the spot. For a moment, I thought the DM was just being too harsh. Yes, this man's 20-year-old son is behaving like a 5-year-old, but the player is actually a 10-year-old, so some immature behavior is to be expected. The rogue responded by pulling out his rapier and stabbing his own father. The rogue scored a fatal critical hit. This happened in full view of the entire audience and all the guards, the other players included. Holy hell, this kid just decided he's gonna be Ramsay Bolton today. As the rogue's dying father fell to his knees, the rogue dismissively knocked him down to make his escape. DM, what's your alignment again? Oh, it says neutral. No, this is pure evil. Your alignment is now chaotic evil. A lengthy combat ensued, but 2 NPC guards had already knocked the rogue out by the time we got there. We were all playing, level 1 characters. The unconscious rogue was sent to jail with little hope of rejoining the session. It must have been after 5 p.m. that we were finally able to start the session proper. The DM took the 10-year-old player aside for a lengthy private discussion. We continued the session and finally reached the goblins that had kidnapped the princess. Until then, and throughout the encounter, the 10-year-old was constantly pestering us to break his character out of jail so that he could use his stealth, and insisted that we were totally going to die without his help. As it turns out, what he was saying was complete nonsense, because as we neared the end of the combat encounter, it was revealed that the rogue was hidden behind a door waiting to shoot us when we opened it. He had broken out of jail himself and was annoying us for his own sake. We quickly brought him down to 0 hit points and he soon perished. But the damage was already done. So much time had been wasted on a player character more evil than the goblins we were fighting that the DM had to end the session immediately. It was 8 p.m. at this point, and our visitors, they needed to return home. With the arrival of the goblin boss and his Yanti ally, and with the death of our ally, and also the rogue, the battle was reaching its climax, but the DM just had all the enemies flee, and narrated us finding the princess, who turned out to be a dog. That's just the biggest letdown I've had in any session. No opportunity to turn a bad situation around. We just won, and the ending was basically spoiled. As for the 10-year-old's reaction to all of this, he was having a blast at our expense. He looked at the game and saw not a world to immerse himself in, but a sandbox where nothing he did truly could come back to bite him. An approach that I suppose can work if everyone is on board that kind of game, which we were not. He didn't even seem all that bothered by his character getting perished, since he didn't really make the character. I suspect he was mildly peeved though when it occurred to him that he'd gone a full hour without playing the game, but it was more measured than I was expecting. No temper tantrum when he got arrested or killed. He was just being 10 years old. TLDR, 10-year-old plays D&D for the first time, and the sheer freedom turns him into Dio Brando. Though I don't have much experience with children beyond being one at one point, I will say that I'm pretty sure that's 10-year-old emotional intelligence for you. The main point is that when you're playing with younger players, especially this young, you have to measure your expectations for how immersive they're going to be in the game. This is why typically you want a group of similar maturity. Sure, there are age gaps in D&D a lot of the time, especially on online games. There's age gaps in my group. However, this much of a gap in maturity and age is going to result in a little bit of chaos, and sometimes just got to embrace it. I empathize with the DM situation here. They've got to manage a really rambunctious 10-year-old with a table of adults and also teenagers, I assume, were the brothers. And I'm not gonna lie, that's not easy. I don't know how I would have handled that myself. Honestly, I would just try not to get myself into the situation in the first place, because I know what's going to happen. It's probably going to be pure chaos. We were all dumb kids at some point, so I find it really hard to get mad at a 10-year-old when the game doesn't work out because of their 10-year-old antics. At the end of the day, we all mature, or at least, well, I hope so. We had started a new campaign after finishing Curse of Strahd. That has been a lot of fun, but as we started a new campaign, I wanted to focus a little bit more on roleplay. I made a character who, before meeting this group, had been traveling alone for 5 years and was lonely, even if she didn't want to show it. She had a cat and her horse, and she was attached to them. My goal as a player was for her to open up to the group over a few sessions and find the family she had long since lost. What happened, in reality, was that we got separated from our mounts during a mission, and instead of going back for them like my character wanted, we went through a magic portal, with no idea where it went, only to be transported across the continent and left with no obvious way back. In character, I mentioned wanting to try to find a way back to our mounts, especially mine, since to this character, they were her only family. Cat was in the horse saddlebag. Even before the portal, one player thought it was a hilarious joke to find ways to make fun of my character for caring about her pets. Every session would have jokes about killing the horse, losing it, and generally mocking my character about it. They weren't even funny jokes, more just bullying with a humorous spin, punchlines with no setup where the punchline was, "When I get back, I'm gonna kill your horse." Ah. These went on for week after week. Several times, every session. At some point, I told the GM, this was causing me to not have very much fun. They said okay, but did nothing. They refused to even talk to that player. I knew I should have left right then and there, really, but I've been playing with these people for over a year. It had been fun before. A few sessions later, after the third or fourth horse joke in a row, I snapped at them. I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was something to the effect of not being funny anymore and it being the same joke over and over again. The group was quiet, of course. I understand I'd made it awkward, but one player, not the one who made the jokes, said they found the jokes funny, and there were murmurs of approval. This is what actually hurt, that no one cared that these jokes were ruining the game for me, or bothering me enough for such an outburst. I had thought these people were my friends. I left the campaign soon after. Post-story thoughts. None of the jokes were in character. This player didn't do any role-playing, and in fact, never spoke in character in either campaign or roleplayed in any way. They were very passive outside of combat unless it was to make a joke, which in the first campaign had been alright. They'd always been at the expense of NPCs, not a player character. Thinking back, maybe I shouldn't have made such a big deal about the horses. I wasn't trying to cause a scene or create drama. I wanted it to be about my character discovering new friends, not her horse. I thought the horse and cat were just nice background details, but I could not justify ignoring their peril if I was going to roleplay this character even remotely authentically. I also guess I didn't expect all the players to be so willing to abandon their own mounts. Most had at least one, too. Look, I get it. You make fun of your friends sometimes. I do that all the time. But look, your jokes are not more important than your friend. If your friend doesn't like your jokes, stop making them. I remember one of my friends made fun of my voice a lot, and I was very insecure about my voice at the time, and I asked them to stop. And you know what they did? They stopped because, you know, we're friends. And yeah, we make fun of each other, but if we take it too far, there's nothing wrong with just stepping back. Because again, friends are more important than the jokes about your friends. Also, no one likes that wannabe class clown, you know? If you're gonna make jokes, make sure they're funny. I mean, clearly the rest of the party enjoyed them, but the subject of the jokes didn't enjoy them. And in my opinion, that's at least a partial part of making a good joke at the expense of your friend. You should be laughing with them, not just mocking them for cruel amusement. A lighthearted roast every now and then is fine. Just mocking a character for no other reason than they have pets, it gets tiring pretty quickly. A few years ago, one of my ex-friends invited me to a D&D 5th edition semi-homebrew game that her husband was DMing. I was excited to be part of a new game, and at first, it went well. Our party's collective backstory is that we grew up together in a sleepy, rural village, so we had a bond of trust established to make it easier to make decisions. Our group had been playing at least twice a month for about 6 hours a session for a year. In-game, that was about 4 months or so. So our characters had been developing for quite a while leading up to this point. Ex-friend played the meta character, a cleric who was part of a secret society against BBEG's forces, so she knew everything about him, from his mother's maiden name to his shoe size. Cool, she can answer our questions as we gain experience, right? Apparently. Wrong. We had been through scenario after scenario together and nothing could crack her. IRL, ex-friend has severe trauma and trust issues, so we can see that manifesting into the game. She also believes a therapist is a waste of time, so she'll never change. We did a lot to earn her character's trust, from healing a dying village of plague, to donating our services to her gods' places of worship, to busting innocent people from prison. Nothing. For months of in real life time, we didn't get more information than what we started with. We only knew that she was born and raised in a secret society against the big bad evil guy and wanted to bring him down with every breath she took, and didn't trust us with anything more. And I'll remind you that our character grew up with us and we'd been adventuring together for months. When we brought up initiation into the society, we got stonewalled. Whenever we got clues out in the world, none of them made sense to us because she never told us anything. DM was letting ex-friend take the lead with the character and how much information was revealed. He trusted her judgment 100%, so he didn't do anything about this problem. The further we got, the more frustrated us players became. It got to the point that we would skip sessions because it felt like a chore and not a game anymore. We wanted to bring down BBEG, but we didn't have anything really helpful to go on, and ex-friend's character was really exhausting her usefulness by the day. During the next few sessions, we told her that being so tight-lipped was frustrating for us, and we didn't know what to do next because she refused to say anything helpful. All attempts to talk about it fell on deaf ears. In our last session, we gave her character an ultimatum. Tell us what she knows, or we wouldn't help her anymore. Ex-friend had a full meltdown. How did we think this would work? It was her game too. If we thought we could play with her, we were out of our minds. She then went through a full list of mistakes we made as a party and things we did in desperation, ignorance, or chaos, and said we did nothing to make her trust us. We made it clear above board that we didn't want to oust her from the game at all. We were just feeling frustrated about not making progress, how the game wasn't fun anymore, and how we weren't being listened to. It was just a game. Why was this secret so important to her? Her character had everything we needed to know, and her reluctance to share info or include us made it impossible to play. We could get the same information without her. So if she wouldn't help us, why would we help her? This is when ex-friend stormed out. This full-grown woman slammed the front door of her own apartment and stomped outside. The building shook with the force. DM told us we owed her an apology and that we better be ready to fix this by the time he came back, and he went out after her. The mood was miserable, and the game ended right there. It was an interesting world and premise, so it was such a shame that would be ruined by ex-friend's unwillingness to play her character properly. TLDR, ex-friend plays a meta character in her husband's game. She breaks the game by not giving clues as she's supposed to, is asked repeatedly to please give the party some information because the story isn't progressing, and storms out of the house with a dramatic door slam when the players force her hand. I obviously don't know the full contents of this conversation, but from the outside looking in, it seems pretty rough. Look, when the DM gives you a job, you need to try your best to actually fulfill that job, especially if that job is a major part of the plot and helping the party. It's a responsibility, and when you cannot fulfill your responsibilities, you're not fit to have them. And look, this player was clearly not fulfilling her responsibilities to the group. Her job was to give them information, basic information once they earn her trust. They do everything to do so, and the player continues to be incredibly unhelpful. And look, when you have a player character, a member of the group that's supposed to be working together, working seemingly against the rest of the group, it's always going to be annoying. It's always going to rub people the wrong way. As for any IRL stuff that this woman is dealing with, I too actually have serious trust issues sometimes, and I will say that sometimes it does bleed into Dungeons and Dragons. That sucks, and I don't like it when it happens, but it does. And when that does happen, I try to communicate with the rest of the party because frankly, I don't want a lack of communication on my part to create a spiraling effect that makes the game way worse from something as small as me being a little bit paranoid. My point is, I don't think that's a great excuse for her behavior. It seems like she just doesn't want to work with the party for whatever reason, and the temper tantrum at the end, well, it's just not a good sign of a healthy group. Alright, and that's going to be it for today's episode of RPG Horror Stories. If you guys enjoyed it, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, you can check out my new podcast, Tavern Adjacent, where I talk about your horror stories, as well as some miscellaneous D&D stuff. It's linked in the cards, and while you're there, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment Meltdown to let me know you made it to the end of the video. And if you like, comment, subscribe, I'm gonna get to working on the 200th episode of RPG Horror Stories. And until next time, farewell.